To approach an absolute monarch with an accusation of murder is a near-guaranteed death sentence. The king holds the power of life and death, and his ego is protected by an impenetrable wall of armed guards and terrified yes-men. Yet, the prophet Nathan is walking directly toward the throne of King David to do exactly that. Nathan doesn't lead with an accusation. He uses a juridical parable, a fictional story designed to slip past the defenses of a powerful person. It forces the listener to pass a harsh judgment on a fictional character before they realize they have actually condemned themselves. Nathan tells the king about two men, one rich, one poor. The rich man had massive flocks of sheep, while the poor man had only a single beloved ewe lamb that ate from his table and slept in his arms. When a traveler visited the rich man, the wealthy host refused to touch his own vast flocks. Instead, he stole the poor man's only lamb and slaughtered it for the feast. To understand why this psychological trap was the only way to reach David in this moment, we have to freeze Nathan right here. We have to look back at the reality of David's unchecked power and the crime he was so desperate to hide. The crisis begins in the spring, the traditional season for military campaigns. David dispatches his entire army to lay siege to the Ammonite capital, but he chooses to stay behind in Jerusalem. The king is left entirely alone in the palace, isolated in a dangerous vacuum of power. When David spots Bathsheba bathing from his roof and orders her brought to him, the power dynamic is absolute. In a system where the king holds the authority of life and death over his subjects, a royal summons removes the possibility of a consensual affair. The biblical text emphasizes this lack of agency through its specific choice of verbs. David sent messengers. David took her. As a subject summoned by a monarch, Bathsheba possessed no functional way to refuse the king's demands. The crisis hits a few weeks later when Bathsheba sends word that she is pregnant. David has spent years curating a public image as a righteous, divinely chosen leader. A child born from the assault of another man's wife threatens to collapse his entire administration. David's immediate response is not to confess, but to exert even more authority. He operates under the assumption that his power allows him to rewrite the facts and manipulate the truth until the consequences of his actions simply disappear. David's initial cover-up relies on proximity. He summons Bathsheba's husband, Uriah, back from the front lines under the guise of delivering a battle report. The king expects Uriah to go home, sleep with his wife, and unwittingly claim paternity of the child. But Uriah refuses to enter his house. He sleeps outside the palace doors. He argues that he cannot justify enjoying the comforts of his bed and his wife while his commander and his fellow soldiers are sleeping in open fields on the battlefield. Uriah is an ethnic Hittite, a foreigner serving in the king's elite guard. While David relaxes in the palace and ignores the religious purity expected during a holy war, this foreign soldier holds himself to a higher standard of Israelite duty than the king himself. Realizing his secret is exposed, David weaponizes his authority for a ruthless escalation. He sends Uriah back to the front lines. In his hands, the loyal soldier is carrying his own sealed assassination order, addressed to his commanding officer. The drive for self-preservation transforms a leader's priorities. When a ruler values his reputation above all else, his most loyal and honorable subordinates become disposable collateral damage. The execution of the proxy murder is brutal. Following David's written orders, the commander places Uriah at the city wall where the fighting is fiercest. On a specific, coordinated signal, the Israelite troops retreat, intentionally abandoning Uriah to be slaughtered by the enemy. As soon as the official mourning period ends, David marries the widow. To the public, he appears as a compassionate protector, honoring his fallen hero by bringing a grieving woman into the safety of the royal harem. When a leader controls the official narrative, the human cost is easily hidden. A murdered loyalist and a subjugated woman are effectively buried under the carefully managed image of a benevolent king. Back in the throne room, David has just heard Nathan's story. The king is furious. Blind to his own actions, David declares that the rich man in the story deserves to die for his complete lack of pity. The trap springs shut. Nathan looks directly at the king and delivers the punchline. You are the man. The parable strips away the sterile logic of political survival. By tricking David into identifying with the victim, Nathan forces the king to feel the intimate betrayal he committed against a man who trusted him. A mind shielded by absolute authority will always rationalize its own cruelty. True accountability often requires an external voice to bypass that self-deception and force a leader to confront his own hypocrisy. David's ego shatters. Instead of executing the prophet to protect his secret, the monarch breaks down. He confesses his guilt and writes Psalm 51, creating a raw, public record of his own moral failure. The 19th century theologian Charles Spurgeon analyzed this specific moment of confession. He noted that true repentance is distinct from the mere fear of punishment. It is the crushing, necessary pain of finally confronting the damage you have caused others. This chart shows how differently historical records handled this event. In the book of 1 Chronicles, written later to encourage a returning nation, this dark chapter is completely erased. The text focuses entirely on David's national blessings and his massive temple preparations. But the book of 2 Samuel preserved the horrific details of the assault, the murder, and the cover-up. It stands as a permanent warning against the abuses of power and a blueprint for how to navigate institutional failure. The preservation of this story suggests a leader's legacy depends on their response to the truth. David's survival didn't come from his ability to hide the crime, but from his decision to let the prophet point the way towards his brokenness.